Hi, folks. Hello, everyone. Good evening. I see some familiar faces. I see. Hi. Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Let's see. We'll give it just a few more seconds to let some of the final stragglers on in. Good evening. Good evening, Kripa. Lots of familiar faces on here, including Sherry. Hi, Sherry. Hi, everyone. Awesome. Well, I think that's everyone, and our staff will continue to let folks in and as they hop on. But I wanted to first say thank you to everyone for joining us tonight. We're very excited to have you here and to hear from you all as we prep for our 2023 General Assembly session. I'm Delegate Irene Shin, and I represent the 86th District, and I am joined tonight by a number of our esteemed members of the General Assembly. And I'm gonna play the role of moderator tonight and pass the mic off and give each of our legislative members an opportunity to give brief remarks and introduce themselves. And so I'm gonna pass the mic first to Delegate Ken Plum from just next door over in Reston.
Irene, would you pass the mic to me, please? Thank you. Thank you and good evening, everyone. And I want to thank Irene and her staff for setting this program up. We want to each time before we go to Richmond to check in with folks to see what's on your mind and make sure that we're responsive to your needs and interests. I'm going to provide a very brief overview of where we are in this 2022 session. As you may know, or let me tell you that up until the 1970s, Virginia legislature only met every other year. And then with the constitutional amendment early 1970, we went to an annual session. The long session, so-called, is in the odd years, and that's when we pass the budget and deal with our major legislative programs. The session in the evening years is supposed to be 30 days and supposedly deal with items such as correcting anything that we need to do in the code, bringing our budget up to date with latest revenue projections and so on. But the fact of the matter is that we generally extend the 30-day session to 45 days because since we're meeting, we need to take up the issues that are current at this time that may not have come up in a previous session. So we expect a full and robust session dealing with a range of subjects that you're going to hear about tonight. And we want to remind you that if you would to send into the chat room your particular questions so that we can be responsive to what your needs are. We have a budget that I know Senator Parker and others will speak to tonight that has a substantial reserve, which is good considering it appears now that we might be heading to a recession. You will hear some people say that we have a surplus, but I would suggest to you that when you look at the unmet needs that are present in this Commonwealth, as well as the potential of us going into a recession, that money that's in reserves will be well placed. But what we want to make sure of is that any money that we spend, that it will meet the priorities that are high on your list. The notion of whether we could offer a tax cut to feed people is an attractive one. I don't think there's anyone on this program tonight who wouldn't love to be able to deliver a nice big tax cut to everyone, but we also have to be responsible in terms of what the needs are of the Commonwealth. I'm particularly concerned on our education front that we need to do a better job of funding the schools in Fairfax County and the schools statewide, particularly as it relates to counseling services and mental health services. A number of kids now under stress, some left over from the pandemic and other situations that we need to fund. But there's a whole host of issues, and I'm going to pass it along to a next colleague and have him talk about the issues, and then we can respond to any questions that you have. Rip Sullivan, here's the microphone.
Thanks, Ken. Thank you, Ken. Good evening, everyone. And yes, thank you, Irene, and your staff for putting this together. It is nice to virtually see you all this evening. It in some ways feels like just yesterday that we were getting ready for the last session. In other ways, it seems like many, many years ago almost. I'm convinced that COVID has created a bit of a time warp for some of us. My name is Rip Sullivan. I represent the 48th District, which is sort of half of McLean and a chunk of North Arlington. I'll begin by apologizing for my voice. Those of you who may have heard me speak before probably agree that I sound kind of lousy. I have a little bit of a cold, but much more importantly, I spent a couple hours this afternoon screaming at the television watching the World Cup and the successful Americans. So go USA! What a great day for football, soccer in the United States. Ken is right. This upcoming session is one of our short sessions, which means it's essentially 6 weeks long. And as a result, there is just an incredible amount of work we have to do in 6 weeks. And if any of you are able to come see us during the session, you'll see exactly how fast it moves. The velocity is really unbelievable. It's like jumping on a rocket. And what it really means is if the session's lasting 6 weeks, each chamber, the House and the Senate, has to finish their work in 3 weeks, because our bills then go over to their side and their bills come over to our side. So it's an enormously compressed and frankly stressful period of time. I get asked a lot what my priorities are for this upcoming session. And I'm happy to answer any questions you all might want to put in the chat room about that. But I can broadly say that in no particular order, my top 3 priorities are defense, defense, and defense. My sense of it is that the governor has frankly announced rather publicly that he wants to unwind some things that we did when a couple of years ago, which are near and dear to my heart.
You're frozen.
Particularly in the energy space. So I'll be working hard to sort of preserve and defend the progress that I think we've made. It's going to be interesting to see which issues bubble to the top as the most controversial issues. Ken mentioned the budget, and the governor's made clear in some public statements that he has some interesting things he wants to try to do as he tweaks the budget that we passed last year. One of which has to do with continued discussion about tax cuts. And that'll be interesting to see what he has in mind there. It's also clear he has said some encouraging things about wanting to do some things in the affordable housing space, which is very encouraging to hear him talk about. The devil's in the details, and he has promised more details shortly. And then, of course, recently in the wake of Chesapeake and UVA, he's talked about mental health issues. Something that a lot of us on this call have been talking about for years. So it's nice to hear him say those things, and it'll be interesting to see what he has in mind to try to make good on those promises. There are some other huge issues lurking out there. Abortion comes to mind as one, and it'll be interesting to see what the governor and his colleagues in the General Assembly decide to do on that issue, which of course can be terribly divisive. And then I mentioned Chesapeake and UVA. That has sort of refocused, which unfortunately happens every time one of these things happens. But when they happen so close to home, it focuses us even more. I expect there'll be a lot of conversation about gun safety issues. And those are issues that we'll read about in the paper, you'll watch online. They can be very divisive because, and you hear more about them because they are so divisive. One of the things I try to remind people of is that we will also accomplish in these 6 short weeks a lot of things having to do just with the nuts and bolts of running the Commonwealth. And a lot of those issues, whether we're talking about mundane bills, about, I've got one that has to do with signs and medians, really sexy stuff like that. But a lot of those bills will pass 100-0, 90-10 in the House of Delegates, and 40-0 or 35-5 in the Senate. Those kinds of bills don't get as much publicity because it's just not as it's not clickbait for people to like to read about when their General Assembly agrees. But by the end of this session, we will have passed hundreds of bills, hundreds, maybe even 1,000 bills. And most of them, the vast majority, will pass with commanding bipartisan support. It's the other stuff that we tend to fight about. So I'm hoping for a good session. I'm hoping for a productive session. And I look forward to your questions tonight. And Irene, I don't know who is next, but I know you do know who's next.
I can take the proverbial mic from you and pass it over to Senator Barker.
All right. I'm George Barker, state senator
and will have inherited the a district. It's the 36th district where I will be running next year. And my district goes from Clifton north to up through all of Centerville, all of Chantilly, all of the 20171 zip code for in the Herndon area up to about the Dulles Toll Road heading out to the airport. And then it goes down over to the western edge of the Fairfax City. So we have the Fair Oaks and Fair Lakes areas, and those types of things in there. So so I'm getting to know a lot of new people here, and it's been very positive thus far. And as Delegate Plum had mentioned, I have a little something to do with the budget. There are two of us that are co-chairs of the Senate Finance and Appropriations Committee, and we live pretty near each other because Senator Howell and I are the two, and Senator Howell lives in Reston. And but we worked very hard on the budget this past year. We got a lot of additional funding. We began to deal with some issues that we had kept putting off year after year. One of them was the affordable housing that Delegate Sullivan just talked about. And we got a substantial amount of money, a substantial increase in the money for the Housing Trust Fund at the state level. And for the first time, we really built into established a state tax credit for affordable housing. And there's been a federal tax credit for a long time, and that would help some people who have about 60 to 70%, or maybe up to about 80% in some instances in terms of the area median income. But the people who are below the 60% threshold have not been eligible for most of the programs that have been funded with the federal tax cut. And what we will be able to do with the state tax cut is be able to make the provisions available to a lot of people who are 30 and 40%, 50% of the area median income, the sort of the very poor of those, rather than those that are struggling, but still a little bit higher on that. And we did it on a bipartisan basis with the chair of the House Appropriations Committee, a Republican from Virginia Beach, has supported that, has stepped in and supported that pretty strongly too. And the governor is talking about that as well now. We also made major investment in K-12 education. We did a lot of things in terms of pre-K this past year, but most significantly, we in 2009 had actually 2009-2010 had decided to not pay all of the state share for the operations of the K through 12 educational school divisions around the Commonwealth. And what we said was anyone who creates an additional position that's not a teaching position, but was a support position, what was characterized as, which can be anything from a principal to a counselor, to a bus driver, to a custodian, to pretty much anybody else. And this particularly affects that when these new positions have been created, they've been targeted specifically at the school systems, including Fairfax and Loudoun and Prince William and some of the others in Northern Virginia that have had growing student populations. They've not been, they've not received adequate state funding and have had to create new positions, and they have paid the 100% of the cost. And we basically established a process to start paying back what we owe, what we've owed for the last 13 years. So we are making some significant progress on that. And then the other thing I think is going to be another focus on the budget this year is the mental health side. We have a lot more people who need mental health than we have staff people to be able to operate that. And so we will provide additional funding there, and we'll provide increases in salaries and benefits for people at through the state system of mental health, but also through the community services boards in Fairfax County. And with that, I'll pass it on to, I guess, Senator Boysko, maybe. Is that correct?
Would you
I
like me to
think
go
I'm
next?
next.
Yeah, I think Kathleen was going to go next at that.
Okay.
So I'm Delegate Kathleen Murphy, and I represent the 34th District, which is going to be, I think, the new 6th or 8th district. I forget the number. It's McLean, Great Falls. It used to have parts of Loudon, but it will no longer be out in Loudon. You know, with the Democrats in the majority, we had some really amazing accomplishments. We had success in the arenas that are so important to all of us, but especially in gun safety, which is a special kind of emphasis that I've had every year that I've been in the House of Delegates, because my brother was murdered. And so for me, it's always been a personal issue. But we also were able to put in legislation that protected women's rights. And we supported our schools, we supported healthcare. We did some really good things. And so these are things that we're going to have, in women's rights especially, but we're going to have to move forward in this next session when we aren't in the majority, and we're going to have to make sure that we protect those rights. And I think it's going to be a battle, to be honest. I think that we're going to have some good opportunities, and I don't think we'll ever give up this fight to pass gun safety measures and to make that just kind of a part of our everyday life, is to encourage gun safety. We've just seen too many tragedies across this great country of ours because it's too easy to buy a gun even when you're underage. So this is what I'm going to be focusing on. Plus, I work on rare diseases because we had a daughter who just died who had a rare disease. And I know how important it is. And I know how much it costs a family to have to take care of someone who has these special needs. These are all things that we'll be focused on, that I'll be focused on. And then we'll, of course, be right there standing next to all of you, protecting voting rights. So that's where my heart is this year. I hope that many of you will be standing right there beside me. And now you get to hear from our wonderful Senator Jennifer Boysko.
Well, it's good to see everybody. I'm Jennifer Boysko. I represent the 33rd Senate District, which is about half, the eastern half of Loudoun County and a portion of the Herndon, Chantilly, Reston area. In the redistricting, the district that I represent will completely change to be an all Fairfax district, making up of Herndon, Reston, McLean, Great Falls, and Wolf Trap. So Drainesville district and a good portion of Hunter Mill district. The things that I've been working on, broadband, I'm the chair of the Broadband Advisory Council. We are really close to closing the digital divide around the Commonwealth. I'm the Senate's representative on the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority. And very strangely enough, the House of Delegates has 2 opportunities to put in a member. However, they chose, under this new leadership, chose to put citizens in instead of members of the House of Delegates. I also have been working hard around substance abuse prevention, domestic and sexual violence resources in the Commonwealth. I'm on the Unemployment Commission, so that's kept us busy. And one thing that I've really enjoyed is working on the Civics Education Commission. And I'm actually doing have been working for the past 2 years with a group, a national group, to try to figure out how we can improve our civic health and engagement under these really difficult times. As you all are living too, we know that politics, it's a very difficult time to be in public service right now. And what Rip said, what Delegate Sullivan said, was that actually we get along a lot better than you think we do. It doesn't get on the news, but we actually can be pretty collaborative. and have done a lot of work in coalition with our colleagues from all parts of the state, Republicans and Democrats together. And I look forward to continuing that work. As everybody else has said, we've got to hold the line on a lot of the progress that we've made around our environment, around our access to all types of healthcare, fighting to prevent any more gun violence in the state. I know it's been a terrible couple of weeks for all of us. And I have focused a lot around economic opportunity for all, specifically around giving families the flexibility to take care of their loved ones when somebody is sick. Paid family medical leave is something that I've been working on for a long time, and certainly, looking forward to working on that. Since I'm going late in this group, I've had the opportunity to look at some of the questions in the chat, and you all have talked about things like same-sex marriage and some of the efforts to roll back rights for that. I know that there will be bills going in to repeal the Marshall-Newman Amendment, which does not officially, keeps the definition of marriage between only a man and a woman. And then the issues around some of the rollbacks of our education system, around our SOLs, history, social studies. We've all got to, I'm sure you all are aware that after we spent, more than a year working to create proposals that would give us a full historical accounting and a more inclusive accounting of what we learn in our social studies and history, that very recently the governor's recommendations have drastically changed that. I think it's important that we speak out. Not only is it, not in anyone's best interest to miss part of history, but also it leaves out a lot of the critical thinking and problem solving things that we all are stressing forwards. Finally, we do a lot of work around expanding access to the waivers for our intellectually and developmentally disabled individuals. And I will continue that work as well and look forward to, continuing this conversation. We are really glad that you all are here with us and appreciate the conversation tonight. And thank you.
Thanks, Senator Boysko. Just as a reminder, I'm Irene Shin and I represent the 86th district in the House of Delegates. After redistricting, our district numbers change a little bit, and I will go from being in the 86th district to being in the 8th district. And really the bulk of our district will remain the same, mostly Herndon and Chantilly. And I am sad that I will be a Fairfax County only district now, because I will have no more Loudoun County, and that is sad for me. But I was elected last year, and since being in office, I've been able to serve on a couple of committees as well as the Commission on Youth. So I serve on the County, Cities, and Towns Committee, as well as Communications, Technology, and Innovation. Last year, I had a pretty broad-ranging portfolio of legislative priorities, and I think this year looks pretty similar for me. We'll have a wide-ranging breadth of work that we're working on, which will include coming back for a second bite at the apple on some of the bills that didn't make it through last year. I see Lucy Badenell on here from the ARC of Northern Virginia, who has been a great partner for us. Hello. Been working on some of the disability and intellectual disability waiver complications. That system is quite complicated, and we are certainly working our way through it to disentangle and make sure that folks who have developmental or intellectual disabilities are able to have the dignity of employment without being at risk of losing their waivers or their services. I'll be focusing a lot again on some of the consumer protections that we worked on last year, which was specifically around utility disconnections. This year, we're also looking at some homeowner protections, as well as other types of consumer protections that we can be pushing forward. And so I think, again, it'll just be like a pretty broad ranging scope of work. But as my much esteemed colleagues have said before me, I think the name of the game will continue to be defending the progress that we've made and protecting all of the strides and progress that we've accomplished over the past couple of years. And so I will certainly be a vigilant team player in that realm. I just wanted to also say that, just a reminder to folks who are hopping on later, joining us a little bit, or joining us now. If you have comments, if you have questions, if you have thoughts, please feel free to drop it into the chat. And for folks who are tuning in on Facebook Live, also please feel free to drop them into the comments. We've got folks on our teams who are monitoring the comments, and we'll be able to draw from those questions. So I've got some of these questions already compiled and pulled out of this long list of great things that people want to hear from us about. And if it feels okay with all of the General Assembly members, I'll read out a few that we've gotten either multiple questions and comments about, and ask for your thoughts and feedback. And any member should feel free to jump in, but I will try and pass the mic specifically to a member that I think might be able to best address some of these questions or have really insightful thoughts on them. And so with that, our first question is a question that I'm going to sort of lump into. It's two questions that I'm going to try and roll into one, from David Gelman and Gary, who is asking about RGGI and VCA. And so for Delegate Sullivan, if you could speak a little bit about the danger that RGGI and VCA may or may not be in, and what work we may be able to do on that front, that would be great.
Happy to. Dave, nice to hear you or see you. You're on there somewhere. I think there are three pieces of major environmental legislation which are in danger. First is RGGI, the second is the Clean Cars Initiative, the third is the Clean Economy Act itself. All three last year had bills introduced to repeal them. I expect that'll happen again. In fact, I think there have already been 5 bills introduced in the Senate to repeal the Clean Cars Initiative. The governor's energy plan doesn't, on its face, use the word repeal for the Clean Economy Act. But I think the plan there, my sense is, my reading of the plan is that the strategy is sort of death by 1,000 cuts. So there will be a variety. The governor's made clear he's going to put in a variety of pieces of legislation to make what I would call dramatic and in my view, negative, backward changes to the Clean Economy Act. There is an effort afoot to repeal the Clean Cars Initiative, which has to do with promoting the use of electric vehicles in Virginia, electrifying our transportation system. And RGGI is sort of on the governor is, he swung twice and missed his first 2 efforts to get us out of RGGI. He tried to do it with a stroke of his pen, then he tried to do it through an executive regulatory action. Now he has put it on sort of a cruise control, pardon the pun, where his air board is considering new regulations, and the expectation is that sometime next year they will vote to take Virginia out of RGGI. I would add parenthetically that the governor has never indicated how he expects to fill the hole that will result monies that have come from the RGGI program going towards energy efficiency in Virginia, and going toward flood preparedness and flood mitigation in Virginia. Hundreds of millions of dollars. Hasn't talked about that at all. So that'll be an issue. I think RGGI, we fended off these efforts to repeal last year. I'm hopeful that we will again. Candidly, I expect that efforts to repeal these bills will get through the chamber, through my chamber, through the House of Delegates as they did last year. And then I will quickly hightail it down the hall to go see George and my friends down in the Senate, and Jennifer, to stiffen their backbones to make sure those repeal efforts don't get through the Senate. RGGI, I think, is also going to end up in the hands of the lawyers. What's going to happen is that the Air Board is likely to act next year to take us out of RGGI, and then there will be some litigation over whether that's effective. My own view as a legislator and parenthetically as a lawyer is that that's something that the General Assembly has to do rather than that the Air Board has to do. But as I indicated in my opening comments, I think those are 3 pieces of legislation that are in peril from my perspective, and I'll be working to try to preserve.
Thank you, Delegate Sullivan. Our next question is also a question that I've seen a couple of times in the chat that I'm going to try and roll up with first thanks to Senator Boysko for her work on in-state tuition, and also addressing, sort of what's at stake right now, because from Mark and from Kripa and from Emma, we're hearing a little bit about, what's happening with in-state tuition and it being revoked for undocumented Virginians. Mark specifically asks, what are the prospects for this kind of attempt succeeding, and whether our governor would sign such legislation?
Well, thank you for the question. I find it amazing that anyone would want to restrict access to higher education when we are having such a shortage of workers and people ready to take the 21st century jobs in Virginia. We should be working to increase access to higher education, no matter what that path is. And I am working very closely with the business community to get that message across to the governor and to all of our colleagues in the General Assembly. This has been a priority for the chambers of commerce, for the higher ed institutions, the major colleges and universities. I think you're going to see a strong show of concern that anyone would be trying to repeal the work that we've done, because again, this is an economic issue, and we know that we don't have. I mean, I've been in 3 meetings over the past 2 days where they talked about workforce were the most important things, whether it's the technical community, with like, our computer industry, whether it's our transportation community, whether it's our teaching and nursing and other folks. We need people who can come in and do this job. And this is something that we've known about for years, because the population is shrinking. And we have a lot of people leaving the workforce because the baby boomers are reaching their golden silver years. So we're gonna have a strong coalition to support the work that we've done in the past.
Thank you, Senator Boysko. Our next question is one that I'm going to ask Delegate Murphy. We got a question from Sherry, who wants to know your thoughts on gender and reproductive justice issues and what we can expect this session. Oh, Delegate Murphy, I think you might be muted. Let me see if I can.
Unmute.
Great.
Okay. Look, I think it's obscene for anybody to start attacking people for who they are. We have a governor who's a man of faith. And if he's a man of faith, then he should believe that God made each of us the way that we are. And it isn't up to us to decide whether he made a mistake or not. I'm not buying into it. I'm really not. And I really don't like what is happening when they're talking about, people, the LGBT community, and it's like they're encouraging attacks. And I just think it's wrong. I really do. I think that right now we have enough trouble in our times right now with recovering from COVID. I think we've got enough real problems in this community, in this Commonwealth, to deal with, that we don't need to be inventing problems. I think we need to fight back against these efforts because they're inhumane and insulting.
Thank you, Delegate Murphy. I'll also add on, I think that Virginia has done so much good work on the reproductive access front in the past couple of years that abortion will continue to remain legal in the Commonwealth. And I expect that we won't see any shortage of bills introduced this year that will continue to try and either take on to introduce a ban on access to abortions, or even limiting, other things like contraceptives or IVF treatments. And I think that I can speak certainly, I think for all of us when I say that we'll remain vigilant in protecting women's access to make decisions for their own bodies and for their own futures, and that's central to the work that we're going to continue to do and prioritize.
I mean, I'd just like to mention the way that they're talking about, the way that they're labeling kids and saying you can't use a bathroom if you're LGBTQ. I mean, these are things that are really going to just cause such heartache and trauma. And there's nothing good in any of that. There's just nothing good. And he shouldn't be trying to make those decisions. Their parents and those children, they are the ones who are responsible for those decisions, not the governor.
Yeah. Thank you, Delegate Murphy. The next question, I'm going to pass the proverbial mic over to Senator Barker, and it's from Jerry. Jerry is asking about the Make Virginia Home plan that was rolled out recently by the governor, and the Fairfax Board of Supervisors just discussed $300 million for the State Housing Trust Fund, and others will urge greater funding for the new State Low Income Housing Trust Fund. And as we begin hypothermia shelters in faith communities, how many more permanent supportive homes might we fund?
Well, we will be able to help a lot of people, and we added substantially to the budget. Went up to $150 million in money provided to the Housing Trust Fund statewide. We've actually, through the Council of Governments, I'm the state of Virginia representative on the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments. And one of the things that we've done there is getting all the local jurisdictions to make sure that their policies promote affordable housing options. And as I said earlier, basically we have established a housing affordable housing tax credit that will go along, that will be a state tax credit that will go along with the federal tax credits to be able to make sure that we have projects developed, new projects developed that will increase capacity to help a lot of people with all the way down to about 30 to 50% of the median income in the area there. So I think we'll actually be in a position to make major increases in that with the governor supporting that and the chair of the House Appropriations Committee having supported those types of things. We will be helping a lot of people, a lot of families with their ability to have adequate housing. And if you go back about 10 years, we had almost nothing in the Housing Trust Fund at the state level. And all we were doing was just passing on the federal monies that we got. We've stepped up and have taken actions to provide a lot of direct funding to support families, and now to provide support for the developers who are developing that affordable housing. So we're heading in the right direction, and we're going to keep working at it.
Thank you, Senator Barker. The next question, I'm going to toss it over to Delegate Plum. It's a question that we've gotten from a few folks, including Ben and Heather and Joanne. And it's really about what we've seen in the last couple of weeks with very recent mass shootings. They'd like to hear from us on what kind of legislation we'll be continuing to push for and fight for as it comes to gun violence prevention and intervention. And would love your thoughts on this, Delegate Plum.
Thank you, Irene, and thanks for the question from the several viewers. Gun safety has to be high on our list. And the first thing we have to do is to protect the progress that we've made over the last several years. We are now ranked by Everytown, an anti-gun violence group, as being the 12th in the nation among the laws that we've passed to expand gun safety protections. There will be an effort underway, and there have already been efforts underway to roll that back. In the House, we're going to have a hard time with the Democrats being in the minority to be able to resist those efforts. We're trusting our Senate brethren to be successful in turning those bills back, that we not lose the progress that we've made. Beyond that, I think we need to take a look at a couple of issues. And again, these are not easy issues, but I was interested in a Washington Post column just yesterday, in which we looked at issues in the past that have taken years to pass. And those are issues like seat belts. I was there for the decade or so it took us to get seat belts in cars for safety. Bills like the others that have taken a period of time to get them passed, like banning smoking in many places. If you had asked us 20 years ago, would we ever pass bans on those? The answer we would have said, well, probably not. But we've done it and we moved forward. Gun safety, I'm participate in a vigil on the 14th of every month at NRA headquarters where anywhere from 50 to 100 or 200 people meet to say again that enough is enough. And while we might feel like we can relax when the events occur on the other side of the country in another state, we've come to recognize over the past several weeks, my gosh, they come right back to Virginia. Virginia, with the Virginia Tech massacre some years ago, had records in terms of mass shootings. And now we've had mass shootings in succession. A lot of attention given to the football players at University of Virginia for obvious reasons. A lot of attention given to the Walmart incident. But I don't want people to forget that between those two incidents, a mother and her 3 children were killed also. And that was an instance where a domestic dispute led to an issue that I'm going to let Delegate Sullivan speak to in a moment in terms of red flag laws, where we've made progress on that, but we can't go back. Beyond that, I hope that people will be insistent as they look at people who are going to the legislature now, that we be willing to take the tough steps to again make sure that we have safety bills in place. And with that, I'd like to ask Rip to talk about the red flag law in particular.
Sure, thanks, Ken. A couple of years ago, Senator Barker and I worked together. He carried the Senate, I carried in the House the red flag bill, which I'd been working on for years. Both of us have been working on for years, and frankly, I'd hoped would be bipartisan. How could I think that? I thought that because it had been in other states. Florida, for instance, passed a red flag right after Parkland, with all sorts of support from, among others, Senator Rubio. There's a wonderful video I could show people of former Attorney General Bill Barr talking about how red flag laws are, in his words, the single most important thing we could do in the gun safety space. But 2 years ago, we were able to get it through in Virginia, unfortunately, not on a bipartisan basis. There was a lot of skepticism on the other side. The good news is it's been used already all over the Commonwealth, hundreds of times. And by all over the Commonwealth, I mean not just here in Northern Virginia, but in every corner of the Commonwealth, including deep red portions of the Commonwealth, and localities which have declared themselves Second Amendment sanctuary cities. And that's because when law enforcement learns of an opportunity to save lives, they take that opportunity regardless of what individual law enforcement or leadership of any jurisdiction might think of the Second Amendment. These are remarkably effective bills. One of the things I'm working on, and I know everyone on this call agrees with me, is to make sure that the Youngkin administration avails itself of money coming from Washington in the gun bill that was passed, a bipartisan gun bill passed by Congress, for states that have red flag bills, to implement them better. By what that really means is make sure law enforcement knows how to use it, make sure law enforcement knows it exists, make sure our citizens know it exists. That if you're worried about your father, your mother, your sister, your cousin, your neighbor, who might be undergoing some crisis, you know how to access the process, so that someone who shouldn't have a gun can have it temporarily taken from them, so that they don't harm themselves or others. That bill is clearly one that members of the General Assembly on the other side of the aisle from where I sit want to repeal, and we're gonna have to fend that off. And once again, I like Ken just said, I think that's it's like the repeal effort is likely to succeed in the House, and then I'm going to come knocking on George's door and make sure he resists it in the Senate.
Don't worry.
Thank you,
Oh, I worry every day, George.
And Irene, I see that we got a question about ghost guns. We've had legislation introduced in the past to do away with the so-called ghost guns, and I expect that you'll see legislation like that introduced again. It will be difficult sledding in the House, but it's a bill that we have to stand up for and move forward on.
Yeah, Delegate Marcus Simon from the 53rd District over in Falls Church has been a patron of the ghost guns bill for a few years in a row now, and I imagine that he'll bring it back again. My next question goes to Senator Boysko. There's a couple of times we've seen questions and concerns around mental health, and this specific question comes from Amanda, and she's asking if there are pieces of legislation you think there might be an opportunity to move forward with bipartisan support, as there seems to be a lot of energy in our communities around stronger mental health supports, especially for youth.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge problem. Senator Creed, who is the chair of the commission that has been focusing on mental health needs in the Commonwealth, has really been a champion for these issues. And it's really about funding. You know, you're going to hear again that we have a surplus. Well, we have a deficit of resources, whether it is in providers, whether it's in allowing people who have kind of what we would call a checkered past to serve as peer review, peer support folks, or whether we have supports in our schools. We need to make investments. I believe that this is really where education funding and mental health funding need to be at the top of our priority list this year. And I know that in the Senate, you're going to see bipartisan support for mental health things. It's you know, over the past couple of years, everybody who has a kid in school knows how difficult it's been for them with, you know, trying to get back on board to maintain what we, you know, see as what a regular kid wants to have as a regular life. And I'm not saying that very artfully, I apologize, but we have a lot of work to do, and funding is the priority thing, but we're also, and Patty Morrissey said this in the comments, also making sure that we have the people who are able to provide the support. We don't have enough folks who are therapists and licensed social workers and psychiatrists and psychologists and recovery specialists, and we need to really incentivize those professions as well.
Thank you, Senator Boysko. I'll chime in and also add that the Commission on Youth, which I serve on, has also is also going to be studying the effects, the long-term effects of mental health on our students after the pandemic, right? And having lacked a lot of that support in some of their most formative years, we're going to be looking at how can we best provide the resources that our students need in their classrooms, and not just for the students themselves, but also for the teachers and other folks who are supporting them on campuses. And so that's an ongoing conversation that I think will, and certainly agree that there's bipartisan support around. The next question, I'm going to pass to Senator Barker. And it's this question about sort of a couple of questions that I'm going to merge into one again here about sorry, let me find where I am here. Tax cuts and other ways to prioritize our budget and where we actually allocate those resources. If Senator Barker, you had any other thoughts you might want to add to that.
Yeah, we dealt with a lot of tax issues when we developed the budget back in the spring. And I think we came up with a good balance between funding a lot of things that had been needing to be funded for many years, but we were shortchanging the monies that we were providing to localities and other school systems, et cetera, those types of things. But we did provide some reductions in benefits in terms of taxes to go to a number of Virginians, because we had huge resources there that really provided us an opportunity to do it. One of the things that we did was that we did a substantial increase in the earned income tax credit, which helps a lot of low income and moderate income families be able to, in effect, be able to to meet the needs of their family. And so we made a significant increase, provided a significant increase in that. We've been working on it for years, and we got it taken care of. We also, with Senator Boysko, had dealt with the issue. She had a bill in that took into account a lot of the health issues and took the sales tax off of many of those types of things, as well as address the issue of the tax on groceries. What we did was the tax on groceries right now is at 2.5%, whereas most other things are 6%, in Northern Virginia at least. And what we eliminated 1.5 cents out of that 2.5 and because that was directly addressing the amount of money that the state was spending on different things. In this situation, it was both transportation and K through 12 education. We're going to have to work to deal with the losses that were there, but they were at least something that it's our responsibility, since those are direct expenditures from the state. But on the we did leave 1 penny, 1% on the grocery tax to make sure that we were not putting localities, cities and counties, and some towns in a situation where they would have would not be able to afford to be able to maintain all the services they needed, and would feel a lot of pressure to because with the grocery tax, if it had gone to zero, which had been proposed by the governor, it would have resulted in higher property tax bills paid by all the residents of the jurisdictions. So we did those types of things. We did not do a gas tax. We did increase significantly the standard deduction as for income taxes. So that was something that will benefit a lot of people. And I think that with the things that we did, and we also provided checks to everybody who was paying taxes with their income tax at $250 per adult. So it was either $250 if you were single and $500 if you were married. That we provided in October. I think pretty much all of those came out. Those checks came out then. So we did take a lot of steps positive in terms of reducing taxes for Virginians, and we are this year we have less assets available, but with the needs in K through 12 education, in the affordable housing field, in the mental health field, and several other things. I think we have enough other uses of those monies that will be we will focus on this year rather than a substantial substantial tax cuts.
Delegate Shin, you're muted.
Thank you, Senator Boysko. Thank you, Senator Barker, for that thorough answer. We've got time for just a couple more questions, and I'm hoping I can pass this one of our final two over to Delegate Murphy. If Delegate Murphy, can you hear me? Excellent. It's a question from Joe Porter, who's asking about what we can do to prevent the whitewashing and erasure of Black history and other narratives from Virginia school curriculum. You're muted too.
While she's unmuting, I'll tell everyone I have a colleague who has on her bookshelf behind her head when we're doing these Zoom calls, a little sign that says, "You're muted." Go ahead, Kathleen.
I need to put that sign behind me. There are going to be a lot of things that we're going to disagree with the other side about. And this is going to be one of those issues. We can't let that kind of division dictate what happens in this General Assembly this coming year. We have to keep on track. We can't let them talk about what someone said here. The unions COVID closed our schools. Well, the unions didn't close our schools. COVID closed our schools. Um, we have good futures ahead for Virginia. We have really good futures ahead, and we're going to have to fight hard to keep us on track and not let us go backwards. So, I mean, this is going to be our goal for this year. It's got to be our goal. And I think we can work together and keep and keep this. I think I've worked very hard on making it, welcoming for our veterans. I mean, that's been a really big issue for me. So, I mean, we're a good team, and I think we've proven that through the years. And I think that's what we need to do going forward to keep us on the right track.
Thank you, Delegate Murphy. I know there's been a number of community organizations that have been working diligently to work with the Department of Education to make sure that the standards of learning, especially the most recent proposal and revisions, right, where they referenced Native Americans as the first immigrants, right? There are some egregious errors, and I think that we're going to continue to fight to make sure that all of the stories and narratives of Virginians are represented in our histories and accurately told. And so
Irene, could
yes.
I interject with that too?
Yes.
Writing education standards is a function of the Board of Education, not the legislature. But I share the concern that others have expressed about the recent effort to rewrite the history and social studies standards. They are, in terms that have been described to me by historians, as being horrible. They are an insult to the people of Virginia. They'll make Virginia the laughing stock of the nation. There's an effort to right-wing whitewash the curriculum in Virginia. We can't allow that to happen. But the response to that comes not just from the legislature, it comes from a whole lot of citizens who say, stop, enough. We don't want this to happen. Virginia made amazing progress over the last decade in cleaning up what had been a bad situation from efforts in the past where the legislature tried to write the history of Virginia. So we can't go back on that. And I would encourage people who have that as a concern to make your views known. The State Board of Education is on its third effort to try to turn back Virginia's progress. We need to make a loud voice to the State Board of Education and say no to these new standards.
Can I just add a couple of things to that? So I served as on a large work group that spent about a year, and it was teachers, it was experts in the field, it was people from all over the state, from Southwest Virginia to Northern Virginia to the Eastern Shore, parents, students, school administrators, university professors who specialize in curriculum and are subject matter experts who really worked to provide data-driven analysis and proposals to give to the Department of Education. Those were put away. A special a think tank in Washington, D.C. was brought in and created what we have in front of us right now. I mean, it's very frustrating to see that the work of, close to 100 individuals who are experts in their field has been thrown away. I also saw something in the chat that asked about the test scores, and I just wanted to clarify something. There's something called the NAEP test, which is done all over the place. Only 476 students in Fairfax County Public Schools tested. That's only 1.8% of the enrolled students. And if we look at the SOL standards, comparing the NAEP, Virginia, 72% of Fairfax of students passed it. In Fairfax County schools, specifically where most of us are living, 77% of them passed in the 4th grade, 79% of them passed in the 8th grade. That is not a failure. We are putting apples and oranges together, looking at a test that very, very, very few students take and extrapolating the results, claiming that we're failing somehow. I just feel like that has to be said. We have really, obviously, we need to do better, but we have done a great job, and Virginia is at the top of the list of schools around the country as far as achievement and testing and standards. And I think our public school system is something to be applauded.
Is
So
this a marketing issue?
Oh, Senator Briscoe.
Delegate Shem, I was just passing it back to
Oh,
you.
yep. Thank you so much. We're over time already, but I wanted to take a quick second just to address some of the questions I saw around campaign finance reform. There are a number of advocates on this call who have joined us and have been good advocates on campaign finance reform and ensuring we have transparent campaigns and that candidates are held accountable to a higher standard for transparency, really. And so I just wanted to address really quickly, I think that the personal use bill will come back again this year. Delegate Marcus Simon from Falls Church in the 53rd District has been a patron of that personal use bill over and over again. And I hope to see it come back, and fingers crossed every year that it gets across the finish line. But last year, I was pretty disappointed to see that some of the patrons or some of the people who voted for it the year before voted against it last year. And so I don't understand the whiffling and the waffling there. But I hope to see it introduced again, and hopefully it'll pass. And I think there are a number of other campaign finance reform measures that will be introduced this cycle or this session that will address, things broad ranging from campaign finance limits to public financing options for campaigns, as well as stricter disclosure rules, like the kinds that we see in some states all across the country, to help strengthen and bolster public trust in our campaigns and election systems here. So I'm looking forward to continuing those conversations with those good advocates. So thank you all for being on tonight. And again, I want to say thank you so much to the members of the General Assembly and our regional delegation here for joining us tonight and offering their insights and sharing their wisdom. And for everyone who showed up tonight, this is part of the civic engagement process, and we're really glad that you are here and engaging with your public elected officials and your representatives, because I think that public service works best when we represent the issues and the concerns that are most prevalent and at the top of mind for our constituents and our community. So thank you all for being here and sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you.
Nice seeing you all. Thanks.
Thank you all.